Alright guys, I just showed you the proper way to set it up for a squat. Now, one of the other main extension movements is a bench press. Now you come over here real quick. You'll notice I set it up just like I set up the other one. The way I got to this point was I put this smaller chain over the bar. I held the bar on my chest, which would have been the bottom of my range of motion, and I had somebody clip this so that I knew that this chain would be on the floor at bottom position. Then I went ahead and just clipped 3. Like I said before, during the squat, I can put as much chain on as I want, as long as it's deloaded, all deloaded at the bottom position. So here, just out of example, I got 3 big clips on each side, each link weighing a pound. I got roughly, probably 80 pounds of accommodation the way that I have this set up right now. So I'm going to go ahead and do a rep for you guys. 90% of the time when you're using the chains, you're using them for the acceleration, the overspeed eccentrics, and accommodate the strength curve. So usually you're going to be lifting with chains extremely fast. Unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder or increase actual muscle size on your frame, you're never going to be doing the eccentric motion slow with chains like you still would in a lot of other lifts. Sometimes we control the eccentric motion, the going down part, just to get the desired training effect. With chains, 90% of the time, it needs to be fast. So I'm going to go ahead and notice when I come down, all that chain is going to be on the floor. As I press, all those links are going to come up. So you'll notice when I'm up at lockout, I'm pulling that chain off the floor, accommodating the strength curve. I haven't counted this out, but this is probably roughly somewhere around anywhere between 60 and 85 pounds of total accommodation, which isn't a whole lot, but I can make it as much as I want. I could make 200 pounds of accommodation. The main thing is that I have the 45s on each side on the bar. This is actually the 3-inch fat bar that happens to weigh 60 pounds. So rather than 135 pounds, I actually have 150 pounds here. So on my chest, with this bar, I have 150 pounds. As I press, that increases as the links come off the floor. At lockout, I probably have around 220 pounds. I'll demonstrate one more for you so that you can watch the chain and see the extra weight. Here, I just have bar weight. I have the 60-pound 3-inch fat bar and the 45. As I press, I'll pull that chain up, accommodating up to around the 200-pound range. That's the way that we would use the chains for a bench press. I'm going to go ahead here and talk about using the chains with injury real quick. A lot of guys get injuries to their elbows, their pecs, and a lot of people who have improper bench form have really irritated bicep tendons right in the front of their shoulder, and their shoulders feel like they're on fire when they're benching. It's usually due to just an aggravated tendon from improper form when they were lifting. I actually was guilty of that myself when I first got into lifting. What this will allow us to do is I can deload this bar a lot to where I just have the bar, and by adding lots of chain, when I have the bar here, I can have light weight, so there's not much weight on that bicep tendon that's irritated, or there's not much weight on that pec that I've previously torn or maybe strained, or there's not a lot of stress in my elbow that maybe I have tendonitis in. And then as I press, once I get more help from my triceps, my lats are flaring out, and I'm actually in contraction of the main part of my chest, then I'm taking all the weight. So that's how you can set up the chains as well to help out work around an injury. Now I'm going to show you guys how to use the chains for isometrics. When I demonstrated the bench press and the squat, you got an idea of how to properly set the chain up. as well as how to have it set up to use it for accommodating the strength curve, creating acceleration throughout your lift, using it for the overspeed eccentrics, working around an injury, doing a slower eccentric, which ultimately is also going to mean a slower concentric movement because of the extra weight of the chain. For muscle building, so the only other two main reasons why we use the chain is for the isometrics and for the osculating pendulum effect for stability. I'm going to show you guys how to set them up for isometrics. So we know through doing isometric training, we can create intramuscular tension, we can recruit more motor units, but most importantly what isometric training does is it allows you to become stronger at a certain joint angle. What that just means is, let's say I'm bench pressing and I have a bunch of weight on here and I start pressing and I get stuck right here. At this particular joint angle of my elbow, I'm weak because I press to there, I can't go anymore and it comes down. Well, by isometrically working at the one spot that we're stuck at, we'll get stronger at that spot. Unfortunately, isometric training at one specific joint angle will not make you stronger at all of your joint angles. But just to work on that one spot, it's going to allow us to get stronger at our sticking points through our lifts. And for bodybuilders, it's going to recruit a little more motor units, create a little more intramuscular tension, hopefully getting some more muscle growth. So the typical way as a trainer or a strength coach that you're taught to set up an isometric lift is as follows. You'll notice I have the two pins here in the rack. So what I'm going to do is press the weight up to the specific spot that I normally would get stuck at, and then I'm going to hold it there for, let's say, 3 to 6 seconds, pushing as hard as I can. So if this top bar here represents where I normally get stuck in my bench press lift, this is how you would normally work isometrics to improve at that spot. Notice I have a Swiss bar here. This is one of the several different bars that we have. These bars represent where I normally get stuck in my lift when I'm just benching normal. So what I did was I pressed up just to that specific spot where I normally get stuck, and then I kept pressing against it as long as I could until I started to lose it, or I felt like I wasn't able to push with the same amount of force 5 seconds later than what I did when I first made contact with it. So that's when I stopped. The only problem is you're never going to be able to measure this to fit your exact strength curve. Just because a power rack doesn't know that much adjustability, and you would have to have somebody stand on the side of you, measure exactly where you get stuck, and then try and set the power rack up to fit exactly that. So it's kind of hard. Plus, this is a little like jarring on your joints and your tendons. It's kind of like when you hit a baseball with a baseball bat and you get the ring feeling. That kind of happens when you do it like this. So the way that we can set the chains up is we can just remove the top bar completely. Again, this chain has already been measured specifically for my range of motion on this exercise. Every person should have it measured specifically for them. You know, half goes on the floor, half off the floor. What works for me works for you. It needs to be measured for you so that you get results. You'll notice I have a whole bunch of chain now. Lots of them. Set up the same way I've showed you in the previous part of the video. Now I just hook it over. Now what's going to happen is, I'm kind of doing this impromptu, so hopefully this is more chain than I can lift, but when I press, I'm going to isometrically get stuck once I pull a certain amount of chain off the floor. What that allows for is it allows me to find my true natural sticking points and get stuck there. And then when I get stuck there, I'm going to keep pressing against it as long as I can. The same thing I did here just previously, but without the joint jarring effects and without wondering if it's measured to where my actual sticking point is. This is going to find my true sticking point, and it's going to make me work at it in a complete natural range of motion. for me to find out where I'm stuck. Once I get stuck, I keep pressing. As soon as the bar starts to descend, or I feel like I'm not able to continue to make the same force, as soon as, like 5 seconds after I get caught, that I made as soon as I got there, that's when I go ahead and come down. That was actually a little too light. I could have went ahead and pressed it all the way out, but for the purpose of the video, it shows you how to set up the chains for isometrics. Now I'm going to show you how to set up the chains for the oscillating pendulum effect to work the stabilizers. The reason that we want to work the stabilizers is eventually when you get to the point where you're starting to move heavy weight, whether you're moving it fast, well really you can't move heavy weight slow, it just appears slow, but when you start handling really high loads and you don't work the stabilizers, it's like trying to fire a cannon out of a canoe. It's not going to work. You need to make sure that all the small things are built up to be able to withstand the heavy weight and heavy force, and that's where the stabilizers come in. Especially for athletes that need to be like pivoting on one foot or one hand. You know, you want all the stability to be able to handle whatever force you put at it. So you need to make sure that you're working the stabilizer muscles, not just the beach muscles or the primary movers or the well-known muscles. You got to work the small ones too. The way that we can do that is we actually have a bar made of bamboo here that we connect to kettlebells. I'll show you guys how we can do it with chain. So all we'll do is we take the small chain. You're just going to go up enough lengths to get around the bar. Usually it's about 9. Clip it, so it's actually 9 from the bottom. And then just loop it around. Take your 5 foot of chain, and instead of clipping it in the middle, clip it at both ends. Clip it all the way through your hole. So you notice, now I have this chain that's swinging. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to demonstrate for you guys a shoulder press to work the stabilizers in the shoulders. But as I press this weight's going to want to swing and it's going to want to shake. Now it's not anywhere as severe or as great as when using the bamboo bar, but it at least allows us to be able to work a little bit of stability. And you can set them up like this for any lift. Squat, deadlift, bench press, all the extension lifts, you just hook the chain up. If you want to adjust what the type of sway is, just change how much you put. Usually the more chain, the longer, the more of a sway you're going to have. So for an example, on a shoulder press, you'll notice it's already kind of swaying each way, and when I press it, it's much harder for me to just press straight up. The bar's kind of wanting to wobble. And as you start pressing it fast, it will become greater. So just like when you're trying to use the chain for overspeed eccentrics, use the chain to increase acceleration, and use chain to accommodate the strength curve, you need to be moving the bar as fast as possible, both eccentrically and concentrically. You don't want to hook the chains up like this, or you don't want to hook the chains up like this over here for a squat, and then squat slow. Or if you're over here, you don't want to be lowering it slow. You need to be doing the movement as fast as possible, down and up, unless you're just trying to work around the injury, or build the muscle, or do the isometrics. For the purpose of working stabilizers, accommodating strength curve, eccentrics, speed eccentrics, and acceleration, eccentric movement needs to be fast. Lower it, that's how you work it for the stabilizers.